Jamie Jenkins was the former head honcho of health statistics at the Office of National Statistics, and we are always glad to see him. Everything that Jamie talked about last year, we've just been talking about now. The minimal bang for the buck from injecting huge numbers of people with these COVID vaccines. Jamie discerned that at a time when practically nobody discerned it. The scale of the Albanian influx coming into the UK. Again, Jamie saw that long before, when it's still being presented as just sentimental blather by the BBC and ITV and so forth. So, Jamie, the United Kingdom, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, that used to be a big deal when he would present his budget. We didn't bother covering it really last week. What's your takeaway from the general state of the UK finances, and particularly its implication for Mr. and Mrs. Average's home energy bill or whatever?
Yeah, good evening, Mark. So obviously, big things going on in the energy market at the moment, and it's been pretty much like that for the last kind of 12 months or so. And the big takeout from the UK Chancellor's budget last kind of week was that he's extending the energy price guarantee. So let me just explain what that is to those kind of watching it. It's basically that what we've seen, Mark, is if you go back to kind of 2019, gas prices on the wholesale market were about 50 pence per therm. So, just this kind of think of that 50 pence. And then if we go to the end of 2021, so this is before the Ukraine war, the 50 pence per therm had risen all the way up to about £2.40. So it's a huge increase in the gas prices. And again, this was before the Ukraine war had started. And then they started creeping up again and again and again. And we got to the point where, household bills across the UK and in other nations across the world, I think Germany, another country in Europe, that introduced some kind of price guarantees. So this is basically, Mark, where the government has said, well, prices are getting too high, or kind of voters are starting to get a bit fed up with all of this. Let's intervene and show that we care, and we're going to put some price guarantee in. So what they did, Mark, for the winter is they came in and said that for a typical average household, it does vary depending on the household, we will limit your kind of energy costs to about £2,500 per year is what it would have been. And on the 1st of April, that would have gone up to £3,000. So obviously, you've got that 20% increase in bills that people had. But wholesale prices have been coming down on the market. So the cost to the taxpayer or the government has been kind of not as much as what they anticipated over the winter. So Jeremy Hunt's come out and said last week that, right, great, we're going to extend this energy price guarantee from April for another 3 months because wholesale prices should come down even more towards the back end of the year, Mark. So it won't actually cost the government anything at all. But I think I was in the studio, I think, with you, Mark, talking about, remember Liz Truss? Remember that Prime Minister? I don't think many people can remember much of it because it was, if you fell asleep, you might not remember that she actually was Prime Minister at one time. But the interesting thing with this policy, Mark, is it's going to cost £3 billion. You think, well, what's £3 billion? It's going to cost £3 billion to extend it for 3 months. But I remember being on with you, Mark, I think in the studio in London when you were there. We were talking about Liz Truss's budget, where I think Kwasi Kwarteng came up and said, we're going to abolish the top rate of income tax, costs £2.5 billion a year. Yeah. So obviously a bit less than this £3 billion. And it was all over the media, the IMF saying, this is ridiculous. You haven't funded all of this. How are you going to be doing all of this? And absolute carnage. And then Liz Truss was replaced. Whereas last week, Jeremy, chuck another $3 billion at it, go on.
Yeah.
Not a little, not a word about it, Mark. You wonder who's running the country. Is it the markets or is it the elected politicians?
Well, it seems that, $2.5 billion or $3 billion is important to these people if it's being run up in the right way or the wrong way. You sent me this graphic, which is gas prices and pounds per therm, if we can put that up on the screen. And what's interesting to me, as you just pointed out, you see the line climbs up a long, long way to the peak before Putin does anything. The dotted line is basically since the war in Ukraine, when the West decided to put the screws to Putin, which hasn't really worked out. But basically, a lot of the big increase was before Ukraine or Vladimir Putin or anything like that. I mean, basically, it's a choice to have expensive energy, isn't it? If you're the UK, the US, or anybody, it's a conscious choice not to have cheap, affordable energy.
No, indeed, Mark. And so the graphic there that you showed was where we had the OBR when we had the kind of the forecast not long after Jeremy Hunt come in back in November. And you're right, we saw this big ramping up of the gas price going from, let's say, that 50 pence to £2.40, huge increase. It did go up after the Ukraine war, but obviously remember, what happened there is, the European Union, the US, a lot of them decided to impose sanctions on Russia. We're not going to get into the rights and wrongs of that, but it was kind of self-inflicted, I suppose, because obviously if one of the countries that provides a lot of gas to the rest of the world, a lot of sanctions are going on, what's the implication of that? Well, the price is going to go up. So that was self-inflicted. And then we've had in recent months talk of who blew up the Nord Stream pipeline with that huge explosion. Some commentators saying it was the US, the White House is denying that. But one thing you can't deny, I'm a stats guy, as you know, Mark. If you look at the facts and figures, you can't deny the fact that the US have been a big winner out of this kind of Ukraine war with gas. They're exporting more to Europe. They're exporting more to the UK as well. They've been a big winner in all of this. And but you're right. I think what we've got to look at this.
Well, just let me stop you there, because I think that's very interesting. We were told initially that Putin had somehow blown up his own pipeline, though the fact that he was able to sit in the Kremlin and turn it on and off according to how much he wanted to torment the Germans was quite useful to him. So it never made a lot of sense. Whereas Joe Biden is actually on film threatening to blow up the pipeline. And as you point out, that it's actually good for American businesses if there's less available energy from Russia, because they export it to various places. So it's not only a question of how you feel about the war, but it's actually in Washington's economic interest to have taken out that pipeline.
No, indeed, and you're right. There's no kind of common sense reason why Putin would blow up the Nord Stream pipeline. And remember, there was a second one. There's Nord Stream 2 as well, which could have been put into action, but the European Union, I think, said, we're not going to sign off on this. So it's a bit like, you need energy to survive through the winter months, but the European Union itself will kind of saying, we don't want your energy from Russia. Now, you can get into the rights or wrongs of the war, but you can't deny that the US have been a big winner in this, Mark. But I think coming back to kind of, cheap energy. So you go back to 2019. This is going to be, we talk about other topics where we're kind of shining a light on things pretty early on. This is going to be quite eye-opening for, this isn't just going to be in the UK. This is going to be all over the world generally for countries that rely on importing some gas. That you're talking this 50 pence per therm back in kind of 2019. It's gone up. It's starting to come back down again, Mark. But pretty much the average UK household, and say this is an average across all households, but we're paying close to £1,000 per year for their energy. And that's going to be at least double in the very, very long term. We never, this is the wake up call for people in the UK and other countries. Your energy bills are never, ever going back to what they were in 2019. It's as if something has happened. And this is the chart showing here, Mark, that you've basically got with the gas prices, they're never going to come back down to that kind of a level that we had in 2019. And the thing which is concerning for me here is obviously people at the bottom end of the income distribution. This disproportionately affects them. It's as if by miraculously, Mark, getting the gas prices up starts making renewables more kind of affordable. But one thing that's very, very interesting happening in the UK and in Europe, and I assume all over the rest of the world, I haven't been across everywhere, is during the winter months, we had freezing cold weather across Europe and the UK. And we had to switch on the gas. We had to pump gas because we had a wind drought in the UK at the same time, Mark. So the cost of producing energy went through the roof because they use a lot of gas to create electricity. But we had a wind drought. Now in 2030, 2040, 2050, all the way up to 2100, the wind will be pretty similar to what it is now. There'll be wind droughts there. So the thought that renewables, solar, wind is going to solve the energy crisis in the future is absolutely laughable.
Well, why do people still sentimentalize this issue? Because as you say, it directly affects you. You've got a projection here that long term people are going to be paying 6 times what they did for gas in 2019. 6 times is a lot. This is very so you got your starry-eyed net zero, we need to do this, that and the other to save the planet, and then you've got this month's bill right here, right now. Why do people still frame this issue in these sentimentalist terms?
Well, Mark, it's all to do with the focus, obviously, on kind of net zero. We are paying for the goals of the government. You remember, you got the COP climate agreements that come up every year, and that does put pressure on price and energy prices as well, Mark, because as more and more countries say, okay, we will reduce our reliance on, say, fossil fuels, in terms of coal and that kind of fossil fuel, they then say, oh, well, we'll try and buy more gas. So that the demand for liquefied natural gas across the world goes up because it's seen as a more clean energy. That's the big issue that you've got. And, in the UK, we've talked about this before, Mark, that the UK has actually incentivized gas producers in the North Sea to ramp down production, but they have no security policy in terms of the energy for the next 10 or 20 years in terms of how we're going to get it. We've had, in the kind of the honours for the royal honours, we had Alok Sharma, Mark, who was made a Sir, and he blew up.
Oh God, are you kidding me? So he's the guy who was the head of COP26, that ridiculous Beano that they all had in Scotland, and he got a knighthood out of that. Is that correct?
Yeah, he got a knighthood, Mark, and he's on his Twitter profile. I think I tweeted out as well, where he's literally blowing up the coal infrastructure in terms of power stations. Obviously, we want clean energy, but he's blowing it up at a time where you rely on it. And the interesting fact and figure on this is, Mark, that you got to 2022 now, the last year. China are building 2 a week. So the UK are blowing up their infrastructure. China's building 2 a week. We're in a global world here. So, robbing Peter to pay Paul, or the term would be. The fact that the UK, China are not going to be worried about their energy in the future. They're making sure they got cheap energy, regardless of if it's clean or not, whereas other countries across the world are doing what they think they should be doing, and it's costing people a fortune. And it's putting a lot of people, into destitution and poverty. It's absolutely scandalous, Mark. And, this is where we need that wake-up call. The era of cheap energy in some countries is long gone because of the policies of the government who are purposely doing this.
No, you're absolutely right about that. I'm sure, perhaps I saw it, I can't recall it, but I had no idea that awful, woeful mediocrity Alok Sharma had been knighted. If he deserves a knighthood, Jamie, you should get a dukedom for what you're doing here. Maybe we'll get him made Prince of Wales. Was that title taken? I don't know. Terrific stuff as always, Jamie. You can find him at statsjamie.co.uk, or you can see him on Twitter at statsjamie.